This is the story of a man left on the side of the road to die. But when the cops, the DEA, and the FBI all demanded answers, the man's silence just deepened the mystery. Hi, I'm Jacob Glass. I'm a surgical neurophysiologist and former emergency department medic. I've been working in trauma for the last 25 years. And these are some stories of the most outrageous shit I've seen in my career. So, okay, some nights in the emergency department are just like a total blur. It's just a whirlwind of chaos and blood and lives hanging by the thread. And but then there are the nights like this one that stick with you forever. Not because of exactly what you saw, but because of what you felt because of the incident. And this is a story of one of those nights. This night was the night where the usual madness of the ER just gave away to something stranger, darker. So I used to work in one of the wildest emergency departments in the country. It was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this ER was a complete and utter shit show. The charge nurse was fucking the X-ray tech on the X-ray table, like every night. And they were married, but not to each other. Now, okay, if you've never been to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I got to tell you, it's just a completely different world. There's all kinds of violent crime in this small, contained city, just like every other city, shootings, stabbings. But in Albuquerque, there's people getting run over by trains. There's all kinds of high velocity, blunt force trauma from car accidents. This emergency department was like a pressure cooker, and I was right in the middle of it. But this one night takes the prize for what the fuck, dude. So, all right, it started off like any other night. That we had a few patients with some gunshots and stabbings and car accidents, and that was kind of a quiet night. One guy came in with a shampoo bottle stuck in his ass. Dudes love sticking things up their asses. So we're all hanging out. It got kind of slow, and we're trading war stories, and we're like listening to music. This is the late '90s, and so we're listening to like U2 and Bruce Springsteen. All of a sudden, we get a frantic call from the paramedics out on the street. They're rolling in. They say an ETA of 3 minutes with a trauma that they can't explain. What they could explain is that while they were transporting a woman in labor along this, highway at 3 o'clock in the morning in southern New Mexico, they spotted a man sprawled along the side of the road and with blood all over the place. So they pick the guy up and put him in the back of the ambulance with the woman in labor. And they explained to us that he's got a tremendous amount of trauma to his lower extremities, and that's all they can tell us. They're about to show up. So they show up. This guy, this mystery man, gets rolled in. And okay, all right, I got it. This was not like your just typical car accident kind of trauma. This was something else. The guy had been left on the side of the road and had two of his feet amputated. His feet were gone, and his legs, Jesus, his legs were degloved. Okay, meaning that all the muscle, the veins, all of the skin, all of it was completely gone. His legs were just bone. He could bend them. His legs were just bone from the knees down. And on top of that, God, one of his feet was still inside of his shoe. The paramedics had found one of his shoes on the side of his road, on the side of the road, and his foot was still in the shoe. Okay, now I've seen some seriously crazy shit in my time in the emergency department and in trauma surgery, but this was next level fucked up because it wasn't just an accident. This was this was torture. Someone had done this to him, but who? And like why? And this is the part where things actually get weird. I need to back up for a second. The reason that we knew this was done intentionally is because we could tell by looking at his feet and his ankles, which is now all he's got. We could tell that they had been sawed off, like surgically sawed off. You could tell just by looking at how it was. You can tell by looking at it. Okay, so due to the like bizarre nature of this call, the cops showed up with the paramedics. And then the FBI showed up. And then the DEA showed up. So while all of us medical people were doing all of our stuff, I was trying to start an IV, and this physician was trying to get a history, and there was nurses running around doing stuff. While we're all doing that, the cops are asking the guy questions because he was alert and oriented. He was coherent, but he was just screaming all over the place. But the guy wouldn't talk. He wouldn't talk. Not to the cops, not to the FBI, not to the DEA, to no one. He was completely silent. Now, I was asking him questions, just these questions that you ask everyone that's comes in with a trauma, if they can answer questions. He would answer those questions. But the moment the cops started to ask him questions, he was just completely silent. This is when I realized that this wasn't just like random torture, as far as random torture goes, I guess. This was cartel work. But why him? Like why leave him out on the road like that? Like what the fuck was going on? And while all this was going down, we were delivering a baby in the next room. Remember, the paramedics brought in the woman in labor too with this dude. So I was going back and forth between rooms, and we ended up delivering a baby girl. While like I was the first person to like touch this little baby girl's head as she came in the world, while the other room there's some torture victim with no feet and degloved legs screaming his head off. The contrast of this whole thing, like the contrast between life and death, was just bizarre. So I ended up being part of the surgery to help save this guy. So we had to amputate his legs, obviously, above the knee. And so I went up to the surgery with this guy to have his legs amputated. But even as the surgeons were cutting, I couldn't shake this feeling that this guy was like, it was like he was a ghost. He was a ghost in this whole situation. And no one ever got the answers that they were looking for from this guy because he continued to refuse to talk. So a few days later, I was talking to my friend who was an ICU nurse, and he ended up taking care of this guy, PACU or post surgery in the ICU. The cops, the feds, the DEA, they all came in asking this guy questions for days, but he continued to refuse to say a word. Even after everything that he went through, nothing. He wouldn't talk. So some stories just don't have endings. Some mysteries just don't get resolved and they just hang in the air like a ghost, or smoke in the air that you can't see but you can still taste it. I learned something that night. I learned that just some questions are really never meant to be answered. The silence from that man, it wasn't just about absence of words. It was like a message in itself. It was like a deeper truth that no one dared to confront. I mean, the law, the cops, the feds, the doctors, all of them came, and all of us were desperate for answers, but he refused to speak. His silence was like wrapping all of us around like a shroud. And what I realized is that maybe, obviously, he knew something we didn't. Maybe he was protecting someone or something. And sometimes when you get too close to the truth, it's easier just to stay silent, because the answers might be worse than the questions. And maybe, just maybe, some things are better left buried and hidden in the shadows where they belong. Because once you start digging, there's no telling what you might uncover. Some truths aren't meant for the light of day. And that night, I realized that some mysteries are just better left unsolved. Thanks for listening. I never know what type of madness I'm going to share in my next video. I'm working on a few of them. This is my first YouTube video for this channel. So please stay safe out there, because some things are just darker than we realize. Bye.